They're running to enforce the law, and now they answer to you.
What are we going to do to retain these individuals that are getting out of jail and then committing these crimes?
What experience do you have trying criminal jury trials?
Your questions.
What will you do to support reproductive rights?
Why are you two running smear campaigns so far away from the election?
Their responses. Incumbent Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears. Challenger Cyndi Carrasco. Your voice, your vote.
What's up, Indy? It's Ray Steele. This is the debate that we aired on WRTV in the Marion County Prosecutor's race. I hope you will watch it. And don't forget to vote. Early voting starts on October 12th. If you like this video, please click the like button right down there. And I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you along for the ride. Hit the subscribe button and the notifications button, the little bell. That way you'll find out what's up in Indy when I post new stuff. And comment on the video too, because I will respond to your comments. Now the debate. Thanks for watching.
Democracy 2022 on WRTV. This is the Marion County Prosecutor Debate.
Welcome to the Warren Performing Arts Center on the east side of Indianapolis. WRTV's 22 coverage of Democracy 2022 continues with this Marion County Prosecutors Debate. I'm your moderator, Rafael Sanchez. We welcome both of the candidates here today, the incumbent Ryan Mears, the Democrat, the challenger Cyndi Carrasco, the Republican, here today to answer your questions. Neither camp received any of the questions that I will ask them, but they're aware of the topics. We're going to talk about public safety, the red flag law, outreach. They kind of have an idea of what I may ask, but they don't have the questions. We thank them again for being here. We thank you, the viewer, for supplying some of the questions that I will be asking today. This is all about you before you cast your ballot. There was a coin flip before we all began. The first question goes to Ms. Carrasco. Ms. Carrasco, the echoes of violence are being felt and heard across our city. What is your strategy to reduce the bloodshed?
Our city is facing a public safety crisis. This year alone, we've had 180 homicides already. This month, in the first 10 days of October, we've had 14 homicides, and we're on track for breaking over 200 homicides for the third straight year. We have to get this crisis under control. Our city is on fire, and we need to make sure that we change the trajectory of our city. I plan to do this by a simple plan. I want to bring the prosecutor's office back to the fundamentals. We've got to do the basics, and that's through holding violent, repeat offenders accountable, not putting them back out on our streets to make them unsafe. I have a plan to make our office full of an experienced team that is going to prioritize reducing violent crime. I want to build and reestablish critical partnerships that go towards reducing violent crime. Partnerships with law enforcement, partnerships with our community, nonprofit organizations, and especially with faith-based leaders who are fed up with the violence, just like all of us, and are wanting to do their part to make a difference in our community. But importantly, I want to focus our efforts on prevention, from everything to enforcing the red flag law so that the FedEx tragedy that happened over a year never happens again, to investing and retaining second chance workshops that help people get on a better path. Our city is in crisis, and the status quo is simply not working. We have to make a change.
We should point out that every candidate, when asked a question, has 2 minutes. There's a clock. We thank you for looking at the clock and keeping in time with the clock. Mr. Mears, same question to you. The echoes of violence are being felt and heard across the city. What is your strategy to reduce the bloodshed? Sir, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, the first thing is we need to be in a position to hold people accountable. And I think one of the things you've seen at the Marion County Prosecutor's Office under my leadership is, as it relates to homicide cases, we've never had a higher conviction rate. This year alone, we're somewhere around 90%, which demonstrates our commitment to holding people accountable, but also the close working relationship that we have with law enforcement in the community. The sad reality is there are too many people in our community who don't come forward with information. 70% of individuals who are shot in non-fatal shootings do not tell the police what happened. And as a consequence, we have this terrible cycle of retaliatory violence that needs to be interrupted. But those individuals don't have trust in law enforcement, and they don't have trust in the criminal justice system. That's why we make such significant investments in our community to say that we're here to help. You know, we do a lot of second chance fairs where we go into communities and say, we're going to help you get criminal convictions taken off your record. We want you to be employed. We want you to get into housing. We work really hard to help people get driver's licenses, because I meet too many good people in our community who are involved in the criminal justice system, not because they're bad people or pose a threat to public safety, but because they didn't have $160 to pay a ticket. And so we work with them to get their driver's license reinstated, because it doesn't make our community safer or more fair by criminalizing those individuals every time they go to the doctor, every time they go to work, every time they go to the grocery store, every time they go to church. Those are meaningful investments in our community which help establish that level of trust, which is going to make more people come forward. It also demonstrates to people in our community that the prosecutor's office is about one thing, which is justice. We're here to do the right thing, and we're here to try to help people as much as we can. And these types of programs allow us to go into communities and say, right here, right now, today, these are the things that we can do to make our community a better place and a safer place. And we're starting to see those dividends, as you can see, by our incredibly high conviction rate.
I do have a follow-up question. As the moderator, I get the opportunity to do so. And when I do ask for a follow-up, then you have 1 minute to respond. Ma'am, when you mentioned that the city is in crisis mode, can you define what is crisis? What does that mean?
When you have 3 years of, almost 3 years of record homicides, that means that last year alone, 271 people lost their life. Like I said, this year we're up to 180 homicides, and that's not considering the people who are victims of non-fatal shootings. The number that is incredibly remarkable, 750 people in our city have been victims of non-fatal shootings. That number is absolutely unacceptable. And while I'll say that Prosecutor Mears talks about his highest conviction rate, these numbers don't necessarily show that there's any movement in decreasing despite the high conviction rate that he says he enjoys. It's absolutely unacceptable for our children to hear gunshots out on the schoolhouse. It's unacceptable for people to hear gunshots on a Tuesday afternoon. It's unacceptable for us to wake up every single day to the news of someone else being shot or stabbed.
Ma'am, thank you. Mr. Mears, you heard her definition of crisis. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I'm not really concerned about what terms we put on it. The reality is we need to do work, and we need to be in the community making investments and focus on our work and on our jobs to try to make the community a safer and more fair place, which is what we try to do. The number of violence and the level of violence that we see, nobody's happy with that. But I think the challenge becomes, what can we do to solve those problems? There's no one solution, there's no one magic bullet here. But what we do know is that if we make meaningful investments in people, as opposed to just saying everybody needs to go to jail, but if we make investments in people in our community and help them address underlying issues, we're going to be able to prevent some of that violence. We've already seen significant progress that we've made with kids through some of the partnerships that we have in our community, like the Boys and Girls Club, where we provide opportunities for kids, where we provide safe environments for kids for them to go to. We've already seen lasting dividends from that. And so I think there needs to continue to be those types of investments in programming that demonstrate to the community that we want to invest in people as opposed to throw them away.
Sir, thank you for that. We can all agree that we live in a great city with great people. At the same time, there are bad people that do bad things that are being arrested often by Metro Police or the Sheriff's Department. Our viewers raised concerns about repeat offenders gaming the system. That was their word. So Leanne writes, I read all the time of rearrests of serious violent felons. Why are they walking among us? I don't feel safe anymore. How do you respond? Mr. Mears?
Well, I think the first thing is the prosecutor's office just plays one role in this process. And so when someone is arrested, their bond is ultimately determined by a judge, and it's based on whatever charge someone's arrested on. You know, I think the role of the prosecutor's office is to come out there and say, hey, we need a greater than standard bond or we need to revoke bond, which is something that we frequently file. But one of the limitations that we have here is there's a bond schedule that's not created by the prosecutor's office. We don't impose bond, and we don't decide who gets released from custody. You know, that's a situation that's left up to the judiciary. I think the other thing that's important to note is when I'm out in the community, I think the community shares a pretty common sense approach to bond that I would like to see us as a criminal justice system adopt. trapped. We don't need people on low-level offenses. We don't need poor people in jail. What we do need is people who are charged with violent offenses. Those are the individuals we need to see in custody. And I think we can come up with a bond schedule that more accurately reflects that. The challenge is the Indiana Constitution requires that bond be imposed on every single case besides murder or treason. And so that's one of the limitations that we have when we have conversations about what we can do with bond. I think we can make progress, and I think we can adopt the attitude that the people in our community want us to see, which is take that common sense approach. We'll continue to work with the judiciary and other individuals in our community to try to come up with a bond schedule that makes sense, but no one is denying that the current way bond is imposed doesn't always serve the best interest or needs of the community, and I think that's an area where we can make progress.
Ms. Carrasco.
When I hear the question that you just posed, it becomes to me that I think of two things. As it relates to bail, I expect that the prosecutor be the leader, that if there is adjustments that need to be made to that bail schedule, that the prosecutor works with the judiciary to make any necessary adjustments, if necessary. When I hear this question about violent repeat offenders being put back out on our street, I think about the plea deals that I've started to look at from the prosecutor's office. Plea deal after plea deal after plea deal that is cut and handed to criminals. And I don't mean first-time offenders. I mean violent repeat offenders. When I look at the news and I hear that someone's been charged with homicide, I look at whether or not they had a history. And 9 times out of 10, that person did have a history of violent offenses. And there's a common thread where there's a plea deal that's cut by the prosecutor's office that lets them back out on our streets. That's what I'm concerned with. People who are committing crimes and are continually put on a revolving door to go back home and give them the opportunity to reoffend. That has to stop. We need to make sure that our city streets are safe. And for those multiple violent repeat offenders, plea deals like that must stop.
Mr. Mears, is your office, based on the challenger's position, are you offering too many plea deals?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm proud to work with the deputy prosecutors that I get to work with every single day. They come in and they work hard, and they're not political individuals. They all work in the prosecutor's office because they want to make a difference in their community. And I'm grateful for the people that I get to work with each and every single day. The resolutions that you see are more complicated than the headlines you might read in the newspaper. And one of the things that you will see with the deputy prosecutors who work really hard each and every single day is we take on tough cases. We take on challenging cases. And sometimes you encounter evidentiary problems. Sometimes you encounter witness issues. But we still move forward and we still proceed in a way that reflects the strength of the case that we're presented with. And we're willing to go to trial. We're willing to stand up for victims and say, hey, we're willing to go to trial. The Marion County Prosecutor's Office does somewhere between 17 and 20% of all jury trials in the state of Indiana. That's criminal and civil, which reflects our commitment to not only holding people accountable, but our willingness to go to trial and put this in front of the community and say, what we're doing, is this good enough? And time again, the community comes back, because the community is who serves on our juries. The community comes back and says, you have proven your case beyond a reasonable doubt, which demonstrates to me we are taking the right cases to trial. Not every case is going to be perfect. Not every case is going to be resolved to the lead charge, but the vast majority of cases are. And I think the second part of that is we always have to be in a position to take on challenging cases, because sometimes you have to stand up for a victim and say, I understand this case is a challenge, but it's worth taking that challenge. It's worth taking that shot because we believe in you and we believe in this case. And when you do that, sometimes you get resolutions that are not to the lead charge, or maybe you don't get a max sentence. But that doesn't mean the case was a failure. What that means is that we were willing to stand up for someone, we were willing to take a chance, and those are the types of things that the people in the community appreciate.
He defended his position, Ms. Carrasco. Are you okay with that?
No, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with plea deals being cut that put violent repeat offenders back out on our street. And I see that time and time and time again. And these aren't just headlines. Give me any day, give me any case, and I can tell you where there's likely been a plea deal that's been cut on, again, violent repeat offenders. And I want to be very clear. I don't mean that plea deals are not appropriate. I don't mean that it's appropriate to never go to trial and just cut a plea deal. You absolutely have to use plea deals as a tool. But when you have somebody who has a pattern of being a habitual offender, sending them back home on an ankle monitor, because that's the standard plea, is not the solution. I will say that cases can be tried, and they should be tried. And in order to be able to get the evidence that you need to be successful in those cases, you have to have a very good working relationship with law enforcement. I was the state inspector general. I headed a law enforcement agency, and in fact, I had a great relationship with the Marion County Prosecutor. I know how important it is for law enforcement to work hand in hand with the prosecutor's office to be able to build a case so that prosecutors are able to take that baton across the finish line and get a conviction. Sure, cases don't start off perfect, but when you have a good working relationship between law enforcement and the prosecutor's office, you can absolutely work together to get what you need and build a case to make it successful. Plea deals are not the answer to our situation.
You brought up the issue of bond in your answers previously. Viewer Adam has a question for both of you. He says he's a full-time member of law enforcement here in Marion County. He wants to know if you think the current bail system needs to be reformed, and if so, how? Ms. Carrasco, you go first on that question.
As I've said before, the Marion County Prosecutor is the leader of the law enforcement agency. The prosecutor should be leading the charge on any changes as it relates to any bail schedule. Now, I've heard on occasion Prosecutor Mears talk about how it is set by the courts. I have experience working with a variety of stakeholders, leading the charge to make change and initiate change when changes are necessary. I don't see our prosecutor's office taking a lead to make any necessary changes to the bail schedule. In fact, I've seen that in many cases, deputy prosecutors have failed to request a higher than standard bail. They don't present a full scheme of history for the judge to be able to set an appropriate bail. There is absolutely a role for the prosecutor's office to take a lead when it comes to bail in a variety of ways, and I intend to do that.
Mr. Mears.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. On low-level nonviolent offenses and people who are poor, we don't need them in custody. For people who are charged with violent offenses, we do need those people in custody. And right now, you can get out of jail if you have enough money to pay your bond on a violent offense. And right there's the problem. And so what we are asking for and what we have advocated for and will continue to advocate for is that those individuals need to remain in custody. If you are a threat to the community, it should not matter if you have $10,000 or not. But right now, that's the equation that happens. If you have money, you can bail yourself out if you're charged with a violent offense. That's our issue with the current bail scheme. That's our problem that we have right now in our community. It's a very simple solution. If you are charged with those level 1 and level 2 felonies, which are our most serious charges here in Marion County, those individuals, regardless of how much money they have, should not be given the opportunity to pay a bond and walk among us in our streets. That's something that we've advocated for. I think it's a common sense solution. I think it's one that the community embraces, and I think that will produce better outcomes for our community as a whole.
What you're asking would require the legislature to take action. So the legislature returns in January. As my follow-up question, or if it doesn't, you correct me, what action will you take to make this change? And then Ms. Carrasco, if you could answer. You have a minute, sir.
Well, it's not the legislature as much as it is the Indiana Constitution. The Indiana Constitution currently states that everybody is entitled to bond unless you're charged with murder or treason, which means that judges have to impose bond if someone's charged with a rape, a robbery, those types of most serious offenses. A judge has to give a bond right now, and that originates in our Indiana Constitution. So to me, that's part of the problem right there. We're talking about more than just problems with local judges. We're talking about more than just the legislature. This is an Indiana constitutional issue that has to be addressed. I think we do need to advocate, though, for this type of reform because I think it would send a clear message to the community about where our priorities are, but it's a heavy lift because it's not a rulemaking fix, it's not a legislative fix, it's a constitutional fix.
Ms. Carrasco.
I think we can actually start back at the fundamental level rather than going straight to the legislature. As I stated before, there's so many things that the prosecutor's office can do right now to effectuate change if we see necessary changes to the bail schedule. It is the courts that set the bail schedule. And again, what I would do is work with the courts. I have the experience working with various stakeholders to get things done. If legislative changes needed to be done, I know how to do that. I used to do that my entire career in public service. I know how to work with stakeholders, the legislature, by providing information, giving them real statistics that support the necessary changes that would need to be made. But first, we have the ability to make change now, and it's to work with the courts to be able to make changes to our bail schedule if necessary.
Give me 30 seconds on the clock. I'm a little confused. The challenger is saying that tomorrow you could do something about this. So is that accurate? I mean, can you change this tomorrow? And then I'll let her respond and have the last word.
If we're talking about fundamentally altering the bail schedule, no. The reality is, the Indiana Constitution specifically says you are entitled to bail unless you're charged with murder or treason. That's what it says. And so that's the challenge that we have. What I'm advocating for is what we do in the federal system. If we say you're a dangerous person and we think you're a threat to the community, you shouldn't get bail. That's how we do it federally, and I think that's how we should do it statewide, but that's not something a Marion County judge could do tomorrow.
Ryan, thank you. Ms. Carrasco?
The bail schedule sets the amount of bail for every individual, and that can be changed by the courts. I'm not sitting here advocating for us to not have people in prison in jail with a certain amount of bail or no bail, but if we are having issues with the amount of bail that can be paid by people who are in jail, that can in fact be changed by the Marion County courts.
Another big issue impacting our community is youth and gun violence. In 2021, 51 kids ages 10 through 17 were victims of non-fatal shootings. In 2022, this year already, between January and just the first week of October, 63 kids have been the victims of non-fatal shootings. So viewer Ryan wants to know and is asking, what is your specific plan to address gun violence involving youth? Ryan?
Well, let's start with, it's too easy for young people to have access to firearms. The internet is a great thing, but one of the things that it has done is it's made it way too easy for young people to get guns. In the state of Indiana, there is no regulation of private gun sales. And right now, too many young people can get on Instagram or whatever their social media platform is, and if they scroll through their feed, they will see someone trying to sell them a gun. It happens every single day in our community, and we've successfully prosecuted some of those individuals for those sales, and we've worked really hard with the U.S. Attorney's Office to limit that, but it happens far too often in our community. So part of this needs to be a legislative fix to make sure that we're regulating the private sale of firearms as it relates to how those guns get into the hands of young people, because it happens way too often. I think the second part of it is we need to do a better job when we have intervention points with young people to help them understand that violence is not the solution. We have a number of partnerships, including with the MLK Center, the Boys and Girls Club, where we really try to address what are the root causes of the issue that people are experiencing as they are growing up. Why do so many young people think that they have to have a gun, that it's a rite of passage, that a gun is required? And so when you have those conversations, it's important to understand that what the young people are telling us is that it's root cause issues. It's driven by economic issues. It's driven by mental health issues. It's driven by addiction issues in the house. It's driven by, frankly, bad adults in their home. And so what we need to do is we need to be more proactive in terms of getting resources to these younger people at a younger age. And that's why we try to work so hard with young people. One of the coolest things that we were a part of this year is we teamed up with some of the IU basketball players and got all the area basketball teams together and talked about how individuals can be leaders in their community, not just on their basketball team, but in their school and in their neighborhood, to try to keep people out of gun violence. Those are the types of things that we need to do. So there has to be an enforcement aspect to it, but we also have to work really hard on those intervention points to help kids better understand that violence is not the solution.
Thank you so much, Cyndi.
I believe that every individual's interaction with the criminal justice system is an opportunity to be able to put those people on a better path. I believe it's our responsibility to do what we can to put them on a better path. And that's ever so important when it comes to our juveniles. I'll tell you that the tone that is in our community right now is that there is no consequences for criminal activity. And as a result, adults are recruiting our juveniles so that they can engage in crimes. That has to stop. We have to restore the fact that there has to be accountability for consequences for those people that commit crimes, especially those that commit gun crimes. There's a lot that we can currently do using the laws on our book, charging habitual offenders who continue to commit crimes with guns, and we are not doing that. We need to invest in our children, in our juveniles, because they are our tomorrow. They are our future, absolutely. But all the social programs in the world will never be attractive to a juvenile or to a criminal unless they know that the consequences for committing a crime are worse than participating in some of these social programs. We have to make a change. We owe it to our juveniles to show them the difference between right and wrong, and we can do that with compassion. But unless we start making sure that they know that there are consequences for their criminal activity, then we are facing a bleak tomorrow.
Follow-up question based on that response. Are you too soft on youth? Are they getting away with whatever they want to do?
First of all, they're not juveniles, they're kids. And the second part of it is when we talk about habitual offenders, kids aren't habitual offenders. Young people aren't habitual offenders. They don't have a criminal record yet. And so the challenge is when you have these intervention points with these kids, what can you do to make a difference in someone's life? It is a sad reality and it's unfortunate, but we have had to charge young people with murder. And that's something that we're prepared to do. And there are two different paths that you can go on. You know, when you are dealing with kids who are involved in violence, you need to figure out why is that kid involved in violence? What is the motivating factor? And there does have to be consequence. But there's a lot of kids that we come into contact with in the criminal justice system who just need a chance and an opportunity. And that's one of the challenges that we have. They were never given that fair chance. They were never given that opportunity. And so the prosecutor's office, instead of saying, hey, kid who didn't have anything, why aren't you successful? What can we do to invest in that kid, provide opportunities, and say, these are the things that we're going to do to try to help you, as opposed to just beat you down.
Cyndi?
Again, I come back to these social programs are great, and I support investing in our youth. But our youth need to know the difference between right and wrong, and these programs are never going to be attractive to our juveniles unless they know that the consequence for committing crime is worse. And yes, we do have adults who are recruiting our juveniles to commit crime. We have to change that trajectory.
Another big issue this season has been the issue of marijuana. I want to move on to a different topic. In September of 2019, the Office of the Prosecutor here in Marion County decided not to prosecute low-level offenses involving marijuana. In light of President Biden's recent move to pardon low-level offenses, what's next on the local level, considering state law has not changed? Cyndi?
Well, I've been very clear on what my position on this topic is since day one. And I believe that the prosecutor's office role is to enforce the laws, not to categorically pick and choose which laws to ignore. I would use prosecutorial discretion to make common sense decisions on a case-by-case basis. That's absolutely what my stance would be for this topic, as well as all other offenses. Now, we've seen the devastating consequences that categorically ignoring laws has, and we've seen it play out in cities like San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, and New York. I'm quite frankly concerned that Indianapolis is going to become another San Francisco, and I don't want that to happen. I'm concerned that I'm hearing that the prosecutor's office is actually considering no longer charging theft of less than $1,000. That's incredibly concerning for our retail community, and I think that sends a message to criminals that it's the wild, wild west here in Marion County. And if we think that things are bad, if we think that we're having a public safety crisis, if that does go into effect, then let's just wait and see what happens. I really hope that that's just a rumor, and I hope that Ryan is willing to commit here on TV that he will continue to enforce our theft laws.
Ryan?
I mean, that's the first I've heard of that. And the reason we prosecute theft, in fact, I think it was the second most filed charge we had in the prosecutor's office, is because it doesn't disproportionately impact people of color. which is what we saw with marijuana cases. We made the decision not to prosecute simple possession of marijuana because we saw who used marijuana and we saw who ended up in our criminal justice system, and without question, it disproportionately impacted people of color. When we see injustice like that, we're going to act, and we're going to act swiftly, otherwise we're part of the problem. I think it's also important to note that prosecuting marijuana cases is an incredible waste of resources. Not everything can be a priority in your community. Our community's priority right now is violent crime, and I'm going to spend those law enforcement resources, I'm going to spend those crime lab resources, I'm going to spend those prosecutor resources dedicated to violent crime, and I'm not going to mess around with someone who has a joint in their pocket. When we make a decision not to prosecute something, as we've only done on marijuana and abortion, that's obviously a very heavy decision that we make. But we also look at how it disproportionately impacts people in our community. And when that nexus exists, then yes, we are absolutely 100% going to take action. But this idea that we're somehow going to start doing this with other laws, that's never been a consideration. And it's not something that we're going to follow up on. People have the ability and the right to use marijuana in all of our neighboring states. It doesn't make our community safer to criminalize people who have really significant health issues, people who are going through mental health distress, and they found marijuana can be helpful to them. We don't need those individuals in our criminal justice system. We need to keep those folks out of our criminal justice system so they can continue to be productive members of society. And that's something that we're going to continue to do and continue to advocate for. And I applaud President Biden for recognizing that when you do have a conviction for marijuana, it impacts your ability to get student loans, it impacts your ability to find housing, and it impacts your ability to get a job, which doesn't do anything to help people in our community.
You mentioned the issue of abortion, another hot topic in our community. Viewer Nicholas, in light of the Roe v. Wade decision earlier this summer, viewer Nicholas wants to know, what role does the prosecutor's office have to play, if any, in the conversation surrounding reproductive rights in Indiana in light of Roe v. Wade, right?
Well, the Indiana legislature acted very quickly. It took them a couple of weeks to criminalize abortion and criminalize health care decisions. And we, number one, came out and said, we're not going to do that. Again, it's a reflection of priorities. That's not our priority. We also said that this law is unconstitutional, and this law has gone before one judge, and that judge agreed with our position and stated that this law is unconstitutional. And as a general premise, when I'm the prosecutor, we don't enforce unconstitutional laws. And so we made the decision that we're not going to enforce this unconstitutional law that is trying to drive a wedge between women, doctors, and nurses in our community. And let me be very clear about this. We're not going to prosecute women. We're not going to prosecute nurses. We're not going to prosecute doctors as it relates to this law. If women and doctors feel like it's the most appropriate thing to do in a given circumstance, there should be no fear of criminal consequence, and there should be nothing involving the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. We should never be a part of that discussion. And I think it also goes to this role of what's the appropriate role of the prosecutor's office in our community. It's very interesting that Roe versus Wade didn't start in a doctor's office. It started in a prosecutor's office. The Wade in Roe versus Wade was the Dallas County prosecutor because he was enforcing a law very similar to the one that the Indiana legislature just passed. So it's unfortunate that prosecutors' offices have historically been drawn into this discussion about a woman's right to choose, but there is no reason why the Marion County Prosecutor's Office should be involved in that decision, and the Marion County Prosecutor's Office will not be involved in that process as long as I'm the prosecutor.
Cyndi.
The topic of abortion is one that is incredibly personal and sensitive. My husband, Robert, and I lost our first daughter, Sophia, due to an abnormality, just 7 weeks after she was born. So I know how difficult these issues may be for mothers and for parents. And I have absolutely no way it's no place for me to make a judgment call over a woman that might make a decision that's different than mine. What I do resent is that Prosecutor Mears has used this topic to divide us and to distract us away from what is facing our community, which is that people are dying, the real issue about the record homicide rates that I've been talking to you about all night. I will not prosecute women. What I will do is I will prioritize domestic violence cases. Those are cases that affect many women, and that getting those cases right is incredibly important because it may make the difference between life and death. Women have the right to be able to drop off their child at a daycare center without being fearful that their batterer will come and gun them down. Those are my priorities.
To clarify, though, the question, does the office have a role, like the role, this prosecutor's taking a role in the issue of marijuana? Do you think the office, if you were the prosecutor, would you prosecute doctors, nurses, and women if the law says that you had to do those things? Is that something you would do?
My priority, as I've said before, is focusing 100% on the violent crime that's plaguing our city. I would not prosecute women. I would take every case on a case-by-case basis and make informed decisions. But make no mistake, going after doctors and nurses is not at all my priority. I am running because our city is in crisis. I want to.
Let's use the criminal justice system to try to get them into the treatment and care that they need. Too often times we have individuals who have mental health issues who've never received any sort of reasonable treatment. No one's ever made the investment in those individuals to try to help them. We see the same thing on addiction issues. And so when we have that opportunity to get them set up with a public defender, with a social worker, with people who can try to help those individuals, that's what's hopefully going to pay dividends down the road. But we have to be willing to make those investments in our community. But we can definitely treat two classes of individuals differently, those who are driving violent crime and the individuals whose crimes are motivated by underlying issues.
Cyndi.
This question is all about balance. We can absolutely walk and chew gum at the same time. I talk about accountability, but it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Accountability means different things for different people. And as you've heard me say tonight, I believe it's our responsibility to be able to use that individual's interaction with criminal justice system to be able to put them on a better path. But that simply won't happen if we won't hold people accountable. Now, accountability for some might mean that we're enrolling you in a veterans court or a mental health court, or perhaps we're enrolling you in some drug treatment or a behavioral health program. But for others, yes, jail time is necessary. I will stress that in order for some of the social programs to work that Prosecutor Mears has talked about, they'll only work if the price of paying a crime, the price for committing a crime is higher than enrolling in those social programs. So it's about balance. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and we can do both. But again, criminals will not stop terrorizing our city and making our streets unsafe if they know that they're going to get a pass every single time, or they're going to be given a social program opportunity that puts them in a chance to go home and reoffend. It's about balance.
I want to give you 30 seconds to, as she suggested, that the social programs offered are way better than going to jail. Is that true?
I think everybody would agree not going to jail is, if you're sitting in the defendant's chair, I think that's what a lot of people would look at. The question is, who do you offer those programs to? And the reality is, we're not offering those programs to violent offenders. If we accuse you of a robbery and we want to convict you of a robbery, we're not saying, hey, we think you need to be involved in a social program. That's not what we're saying at all. What we are saying is when people come back into our community, we're going to do everything we can to try to help those individuals after they've served their sentence. As one person told me, he said, I was okay with doing the time. I just didn't know it was going to be a life sentence. Those are the types of people that we're trying to help with our programming, and that's where we can make a difference in our community.
Thank you. Cyndi, you got the last word on this issue.
I support those people who have done their time, need the support of our community, and there's so many nonprofit organizations that we can partner with to make sure that those people do have the ability to make a great living after they've served their time. I'm a full supporter of it.
Public safety is connected to the city's economics. Whether people visit a city or not sometimes can depend on the crime numbers that they see, on the stories that they see in media, on WRTV, for example, based on what people are doing. Viewer Andrew wants to know, what is your plan, and be specific, to reassure business owners to either stay in downtown Indianapolis or the greater Indianapolis area, or just move out because of the conditions currently on the ground? Ryan?
Well, I think the first thing is, in particular, let's just tackle the issue of homelessness right now. I think there's a concrete solution that we can have with people who are looking for housing. There are a number of hotels on the west side by the Indianapolis airport where instead of doing the traditional prosecution, what we need to do is when we have interactions with those individuals, we need to say, hey, we would prosecute you for this crime, but this is what we're willing to offer you. We'll put you up in this hotel and we'll put you out of here. We'll take you out of the downtown area and we'll get you involved in the services that you need. We can have a public defender appointed. We can have a judge involved in the process to monitor that individual. And those are the types of things that, number one, are going to clear up some of the issues downtown, but also offer services and help to the individuals that we too often see downtown. I think that's one concrete thing that we can do that's pretty simple for us to put together. The structure is already there, the facility is already there, and you can have the services available to individuals, and you can use a criminal prosecution where a judge can order someone, hey, I'm ordering you to stay at this hotel. We've had too many issues with you downtown, we're ordering you to be there. But I think the second part of it too is, there are some people in downtown who just don't want to play nicely with others, and we consistently see that. And so one of the things that we've done is we've worked really closely with the downtown business community to identify those individuals and make sure that we are aggressively prosecuting those individuals and that we present the entire story to the judge of what happened. A lot of times a judge just sees one instance and it says, well, maybe that situation is not as serious as it could be or should be. But when you pull everything together and say, Judge, we need to paint a complete picture here and let you know exactly what's going on with this individual and the havoc this individual's caused on downtown, we've been able to come up with some resolutions where that individual is taken off our streets and sent away for some time. So I think there needs to be a balanced approach, but I think one of the things that we can do right now is we can use those hotels as a housing opportunity for individuals who have contact with the criminal justice system.
Cyndi.
I've spoken to so many downtown business owners who are concerned about the state of the downtown city. And as residents of Marion County, we should absolutely be concerned with the state of the downtown. Indianapolis is the capital city of Indiana, and it has to be firing on all cylinders so that it doesn't negatively affect the entire state's economy. Downtown business owners have told me stories about how their businesses are broken into, and law enforcement comes and tells them that nothing will be done by the prosecutor's office. It's surprising to me to hear Prosecutor Mears talk about aggressively pursuing some of these cases. That's not what I'm hearing from downtown business owners. Downtown business owners are desperate for a partner that's going to help them flourish their business. And it's important for us that that happen so that our downtown can continue to be a stellar convention city. Prosecutor Mears talks about homelessness and addressing the homelessness. He's been in office for 3 years, and he's talking now about a plan to deal with homelessness. What I hear from downtown business owners are that people who are experiencing homelessness are driving clients away. And importantly, the perception that downtown is not safe is the reality that I keep hearing from everyone here in central Indiana to across the entire state. Our reputation that our city, that our downtown is not safe is not good for business. It's not good for Marion County, and it's not good for our city.
I want you to respond. You'll have a minute to respond to what she said.
First of all, downtown is safe. Downtown is safe, and these talks and these conversations that we've had about what can we do to provide better opportunities for our homeless folks is something that we've been doing for the last 3 years. We haven't seen a lot of cooperation from the state, and so that's one of the things that we're working on is to see what we can do to devote more resources to individuals who want to help and want to make a difference, because these programs do cost money. We are very active in terms of partnering up with all of the groups who are downtown. We have an outstanding partnership with the Horizon House, who deals with individuals who are homeless. We work with them day in and day out to try to get individuals placed in housing. But one of the realities that we have right now, and this is a reality, is the fact that when we have individuals who are ready to get help, who want to get help, who need to get help, we don't have a place to put them because we have a housing issue in our community. And so one of the things that I would like to see is that housing. You know, the initial question was, what are you specifically going to do? This is specifically what we're proposing. We are proposing that we use some of these hotels on the west side and that we use the criminal justice system as leverage for those individuals to be ordered to reside at those hotels, and we provide the level of services that individuals need to address whatever the cause is. We get them housed. Downtown looks a little bit different, but downtown is safe.
You get a minute 30 for that response, so you will get equal time. Ma'am?
I'm shocked to hear the statement that downtown is safe. Now, we can quibble about the numbers and the violence that is happening, but I ask you who are viewing this debate here tonight, do you think downtown is safe? And the perception of residents is the reality. And what I've been hearing this entire campaign is that downtown isn't safe. And in order to start doing that, you have to have a prosecutor who's willing to hold people accountable, to let criminals know that there are going to be consequences for their actions. That tone needs to be set so that we can start changing the perception that it's the wild, wild west here in Marion County and it's open season for committing crimes. It goes back to the fundamentals. It's in the name of the office. Prosecuting crime is the #1 priority of the office, to start changing the tone in Marion County that it is absolutely open for criminals to come and commit crimes here. That has to change.
We have reached the point in this program where we are preparing now for your closing statements. Ms. Carrasco, you go first.
Marion County has an incredibly important decision to make this November. Who will be your next prosecutor? And it all comes down to a very simple question. As you're considering who to vote for, I ask that you ask yourself one very simple question. Do you feel safer now than you did last year? Do you feel safer now than you did the year before? And if the answer is no, then it is time for a change. Now, you've heard Ryan Mears talk about how the legislature has to change things, how other people have a responsibility. It's the judges blaming others. Ryan Mears has failed. Ryan Mears has had 3 years to make the changes that he's talking about today, and he has not. Our city has experienced the worst 3 years in crime in its history under his tenure. Ryan Mears failed Samaria Blackwell and the 7 others who were shot at FedEx. Ryan Mears has failed the countless victims that have reached out to me asking that someone be there in that office to advocate for them. Ryan Mears has failed our community by cutting sweetheart plea deals with violent offenders that puts them back out on our streets. It is absolutely time for a change. I love this city. Join me. I'm Cyndi Carrasco, and I ask for your vote this November so we can make our city safe.
Mr. Mears, you get a minute 15.
Thank you. You just heard from someone who has no experience, no answers, no solutions, and only specific recommendation today was that everybody go to jail. Our community faces a lot of challenges right now, and they're not all going to be solved by a jail cell. I'm an experienced prosecutor. I was someone who's actually in court and has held violent offenders accountable. I've convicted multiple people of murder, and there's nothing better as a prosecutor to bring justice to a victim's family. But when you walk out of that courtroom, you understand that you've just solved that case. You haven't solved violent crime in our community. We need to work on the root cause issues that are addressing violent crime and causing violent crime in our community. That's why at the prosecutor's office, we work so hard on our second chance fairs to offer expungements to individuals in our community. We give them the opportunity to get those offenses taken off their record because too often it's a barrier to someone to get into housing and it's a barrier for someone to get a job. We work really hard to get people's driver's licenses reinstated because we've seen the impact that can have on too many people who are just trying to go to work, who are just trying to go to school, who are just trying to pick up their kids from school. Those are the programs that we have that build trust in our community. We have a groundbreaking partnership with the Boys and Girls Club where we tell young people we're going to invest in you as opposed to try to warehouse you. Those are the types of things that we're doing at the prosecutor's office that not only make our community more fair, they will make our community more safe.
Democracy works when this happens. So I want to thank both of you for a robust, insightful discussion to allow the viewers at home, the voters, to make their decision on Election Day. So thank you both for being here today. Thank you for sharing your ideas, your positions, your visions. For that, we are thankful. We are thankful for you at home for providing us questions for this evening's program. We also want to make a big thank you to Warren Township Schools who allowed us to host this program right here in their schools. On behalf of all of us at WRTV, I'm Rafael Sanchez. Thank you for watching.